I wonder how many of you have ever wished that you could read the minds of the people in your life. Person sitting next to you or across the kitchen table. It sounds terrible to me. I'm afraid that if all people think like I do, I would have to hear all of that. I heard a story on the radio about a woman who couldn't read the minds of others, but in a very tangible and literal sense can feel what they're thinking and feeling in her very body. They kept her identity a secret on the radio program because of her condition and how challenging it is. Her name that they gave was Amanda, and she has a condition called mirror touch synesthesia. Synesthesia is a condition in the human brain in which the senses are sometimes crossed. I'm doing a totally inaccurate job of this. I'm a theologian, but roll with me here. Basically, the wires are crossed, and when you hear about people who are quite literally able to smell colors or taste a sound or a number, that's synesthesia. Amanda's has to deal with the mirror neurons in the front of your brain. This is the part of your brain that lets you feel the pain of another. It's a part of our brains that help us to be compassionate and empathetic. It's when I'm watching a good movie and someone's weeping. This part of my brain identifies with that and brings that emotion forward. When you see a child who's harmed or a person smiling, and automatically you don't know why you're smiling, but you're smiling too. Those are mirror neurons. Part of what makes us human. But for Amanda, she feels what you feel. When she sees you in pain, her body literally produces that pain. When she was a child, she realized that she had this condition at a party when she saw a person get a great big hug in love, and she said she could feel those chills running down her as if she was actually being hugged. And she watched, and it happened again and again, and she followed that person around the party so that she could get that feeling of being held and loved. And I don't mean that sense of being held and loved, the literal feeling. But it works both ways. So as an adult, when she sees a child fall in the grocery store and crack open his head, she has to leave because of an overwhelming pain. When she sees those things, her body is producing a felt sensation of pain or pleasure. She said she cannot eat in a room where other human beings are eating because it feels like forks and knives and spoons and food is being shoved into her mouth without her will. She's lived separated from a lot of people. She's married and has a family, but she said that a normal trip to the grocery store or church would just be too much. Can you imagine picking up on the little subtle cues? And all of us have this to some degree. It's when I walk into a room, I'm kind of an empathic guy. I can get a sense for how the room's doing. Are people angry? Are they sad? Is someone guilty? Their body language helps me to learn that. But for her, it's as if they are her emotions. Now she works from home and lives a lot of her day in her house with just a very few people with the shades drawn because other people are exhausting. She said that with this condition, which has been verified by scientists, and she found that there was a community of people with the same condition that taught her she was not the only one, that one of the strange parts of this was that she has questioned the very basic parts of her identity. She said it's hard for her to know who she is, where she ends and other people begin. Because so much of her identity and felt experience is the emotional and physical sensations of other people. Who is she if she is made up of everything you and we are feeling? Freaky, huh? Challenging. She gets this insider view, whether she wants it or not, of what it's like to be you and me. The veil is lifted, and she experiences in her very body the mystery behind every human set of eyes. The interesting thing to me is that it's not just other people who are a mystery. Now, we don't have all the same kind of conditions that Amanda does, thank goodness. But it's not just that other people are a mystery to us. Good science is confirming that we are a mystery to ourselves. I would like to think that when I'm afraid of something, when I'm scared or angry in a meeting or a conversation or when I watch the news, I would like to think that my desires are mine. The private parts of my life that feel very much me. And yet I know that I feel fear in response to certain things because my grandmother's 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 grandmother ran away from a tiger and didn't get eaten. And passed down a propensity to fear some things that I now fear. Except now I'm afraid in meetings and not running from tigers. I would like to believe that the person that I think I am, called Aaron, who I believe is in the driver's seat of my life, making a lot of really good choices, is in charge. There's a lot of good brain science that suggests otherwise. I've been in conversation this week with a member of our church who is a brain surgeon. One of the reasons I love this church, when I have a question, I call a brain surgeon or somebody like that. And I did, and he's been sending me articles, and we've been in this dialogue. And after reading some of the stuff that he sent me, I asked, from a lay perspective, are we as in charge of who we are and what we do as we'd like to believe? His response was no. The executive function that I associate with the person driving the car called Aaron is but a fraction of what's actually happening in my brain. What I fear and love, what I chase and run away from, I've inherited through thousands of years of evolution in the house I grew up in and social conditioning. There's not even one place in the human brain where experts can point to and say, that's where you are. More likely, it's a very complicated relationship of millions and millions of neural connections in different parts of your brain that are affected not just by what's inside, but everything you've ever experienced and everything your ancestors' ancestor ever experienced. You may not exist, at least as a coherent story driving the car. And that makes it complicated to be a person. Because I would like to believe that you are going to give me full credit for all my good decisions because I made them based on reason and my constitution and character. And I would also at the same time like to believe that you're going to forgive me for my misdeeds because I'm formed by forces outside of my control and I'm not driving the car. But I don't get to do both. And what it means is that if I'm a mystery to myself, not as in control of my very identity as I'd like to believe, a mystery even to the person that inhabits my body, then so are you. And you, and you, and you, and we are in relationship together. How do we do it? For the most part, things are okay. We get by all right, exceptions aside. What a miraculous and wonderful thing it is to be a human in relationship, formed by forces beyond our control and comprehension, a mystery to one another, not as in control of even our own lives and actions as we wish we were. The Buddhists for thousands of years have been saying, you are not who you think you are. Grasping to this sense of self, grasping to the world as it is without change is only going to cause you suffering. Seems like they were ahead of their time. There's a Buddhist parable that goes back at least 2,000 years or longer of a woman named Kisa Gotami. The story goes that Kisa Gotami had an infant child who died. She wanted nothing more in her whole life than to transcend the very physical laws of existence and bring this child back from the dead. And so in the story, she goes carrying her infant child in her arms from house to house, from friend to friend, saying, "Somebody help me. Do you know someone who can bring this child back?" Finally, someone sends her to the Buddha, who says, "I can help." He says, "Bring me a handful of mustard seeds, and I'll make what you need." And so she begins to get very excited and said, "I can do that." He says there's one catch. You have to collect the mustard seeds from a home in which no one has ever died, and no one that anyone knows there has ever died. She sets off on her journey, going from house to house, knocking on the door, asking with the way that a passionate parent would ask if they thought this was possible. And each time in the story, she gets the same response. "Why are you doing this to me, bringing back my grief? Don't you know the dead are many and the living are few?" She goes to the next house and knocks on the door, and they say the same thing. "What are you doing to me? Why are you bringing up my grief? The dead are many and the living are few." That's kind of where this story ends. In traditional Buddhist parable fashion, it does not wrap it up in a nice, tidy bow like I want it to do. However, in the story, she does leave all her worldly possessions and join the Buddha as a monk and a nun. What I read into this is that almost like Amanda, her journey helped her see behind the veil into other people's experiences. That behind every single door and every set of eyes is a human life we can almost know nothing about, complete with transcendent joy and skills and talents and tremendous suffering and grief, the likes of which we, or maybe nobody, even the person experiencing it, will ever fully comprehend. The parable doesn't erase her grief. Her grief is real, but it says you are not alone, you are distinct, but maybe not unique. The attempt to control and remove the human condition will cause suffering. Behind every single door, the woman sees a holy mystery that no one can fully understand or control. And behind every door is a person wishing they could control it. Just like us. Now, in this church, we're pretty good about saying that whatever God is a mystery. I don't know why I'm looking up as if that's where it would be. Anything worthy of the name is infinite, infused in all, was there at the beginning of time, it moves inside everything, was at the presence of everything that is, was, or will ever be, including us. So it doesn't speak English if it speaks, and God's probably not its name, but it's a good word for a placeholder. We've gotten really good about adopting the stance that the holy is a mystery. Our ancestors that gave us this church, in fact, said there are limits on human understanding of what God is. God cannot live in one tradition. Whatever God is cannot dwell in one person, one text, one book, one teacher. They said that it was a problem to worship the teacher Jesus because you were encapsulating what God was into one human form. Today, you'll notice we pray to the God of many names, a mystery beyond all our naming. I love that phrase. And we've gotten good at that. My guess is it's a lot more challenging for the person you live with or the person who works with you. Becky, mystery beyond all naming, who works in the cubicle next to me. But she is. But you are. But we are. My job as a minister in this church, our job, gives us this amazing and precious perspective. Not fully like Amanda. I don't get to see behind the veil like that. But like Kisa Gautami, we visit home after home and person after person After 8 years in this church, I'm just now kind of starting to get to know you. The more I realize that I think I know, the less I know I know. One of the things I can say with conviction about being in relationship with you is that nobody's life in this room is as easy as you think it is. It's not as perfect or easy or put together as it appears to be. Looking out on this very room and the humans I know and see, there is a tremendous amount of suffering. Tremendous. And joy like you wouldn't imagine. People are generous and smart, they're creative and passionate in ways that you just might never know. But little by little, we've been given the opportunity to open the door and see inside. And it has confirmed my experience that every single person is a holy mystery, formed by forces beyond their control, less aware of you or themselves, less in control of their own actions than we'd ever like to be. What do we do if we are finite, limited creatures formed by forces beyond our control, whose experiences of love, joy, wonder, and awe are not necessarily our own, if we're not fully in control of our lives as we believed, and we are less aware of us and others than we will ever want to be? I think part of the answer of how we live in relationship with each other like that is humility and grace. If we are not fully in control and don't know enough, humility and grace go a long way. We don't get to be in Amanda's position, feeling everything people feel, and we don't go door to door asking, have you ever had grief? Because the answer would be yes. But I wonder what it would look like in your life to maybe pick one person. One person. It's hard. Hard enough to do this all day. It's almost impossible. What if you picked one person today? And the next time you engaged with him, you said to yourself, holy mystery beyond all naming, creature formed by forces beyond your control or comprehension, I see you, or part of you. A member of our church visited me this week in my office and asked me if we could do some theology together. The answer, if you ask a minister that, is always yes. That's another reason I love this church, is because our members actually do call us up on the phone and say, hey, let's do theology together. We sat in my office and she said, I know that we have given up the notion of original sin a long time ago, and I'm glad. But don't you think if we had a robust way of talking about our limitations and flaws that we don't choose to have, we would be better for one another? Don't you think if we move through the world knowing that each of us made mistakes that are not fully our own, that we're not always in control, that we struggle with levels that are just human, we'd be kinder to each other, more just and loving? And I think she's right. The idea of humility and grace doesn't mean that we are not going to march in the streets and stand up for justice, that we are not going to hold each other accountable or our organizations. It doesn't mean that at all. But it means that before we jump into the next situation from a place of reactivity or anger, before we move through the world so convinced that we're right, and I am, of course, that a breath, a reminder that once you look into a human pair of eyes, what you are seeing is a holy mystery beyond your comprehension or control. But the other person looking back is seeing the same. Try it with one person today. My guess is that grace will abound. May it be so. Amen.